Hello, Section 5. It's Mrs. Wallace. How are you? I just want to give you this quick video. I'm sorry I'm out today. I know I was out on Friday. Today I did not expect to be out. My husband has a medical procedure and I just need to be there. So I'm doing this video and leaving you some sources to look at. Do your best to try to work with the sources to answer the 4 questions, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. So we'll just kind of go over everything tomorrow and spend a little bit of time. I also noted that we were going to watch a video clip. We started it, but we didn't get to finish it. We'll also do that tomorrow. Okay, so my apologies. But a few things, so just a few slides just to kind of introduce the task that you're going to do and introduce a little bit more content to you. First of all, we were talking about the 5 pillars of Islam. So what's significant about the pillars is that, regardless where Muslims may be in the world and what culture they live in, we always have, cultural context in terms of the way people may practice their faith. Muslims in China may practice slightly differently or wear something different or whatever than Muslims, say, in another part of the world. But the 5 pillars of Islam become really significant, tenets of the faith, that are shared by all Muslims. And so it's a way of kind of unifying a group of people who are, globally part of this religion. And this is the case historically as well. We see these tenets of the religion very significant, in the historical origins of the religion. So the first one is probably the most significant. It's the testament of faith. Muslims may make this statement that there is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That significance of being one God, and that Muslims kind of submit to that one God is probably the most significant thing to remember about Islam. There is also conversions to Islam. Individuals may be able to convert to Islam, and that testament of faith is significant in that kind of process. Prayer is another one of the fundamental tenets. I think it's something that we started to watch in the video. We learned that Muslims pray 5 times a day. I've had students tell me that they use an app to track the time because it's not always the same time, every day of the week, but 5 times a day. And Muslims would face toward Mecca, but that becomes really significant in Muslims around the world, essentially praying at the same time. And prayer can be individual. For example, I was on a school trip one time. It was in the evening, and the bus driver was Muslim and asked if we minded, just pulling over for a second so that he could pray. And, that was totally, great. And he did. We also had some Muslim students on the bus who, kind of made a note to say, that they might pray at a later time. So there's some latitude in terms of if somebody's unable to pray, to be able to make it up later. Alms, this is the sense of charity, which was really important to Muhammad. He was somebody who was orphaned as a youth, so we see this kind of significance of helping people in a community who might be disadvantaged. And so there are several days that a Muslim may practice that relate specifically to charity. We've probably all heard of Ramadan, and this is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, which is a lunar calendar. This is the month where Allah is said to have revealed the revelations that are said to Muhammad and become the Quran. The fasting that happens for a month in the calendar. In our school calendar, for example, it's not always the same month because it's a lunar-based calendar. It doesn't translate necessarily the same date, every single year. So it's not like it's always in October or always in June or whichever. In the last few years, it has been in the school year. There are a few years it's been in the summer, but when it's in the school year, it has been hot, and it has been in June, for example, and it ends up being challenging because field day and things like that might happen in June. So students might be fasting during the day, like from sunrise to sunset. And then they might have, I've had students tell me that they might wake up really early in the morning before sunset, have a large meal, and then go back to bed, and then, kind of go through their day with fasting, and then have, a larger meal at home after sunset. And depending on the time of year, sunset can happen like really late in the afternoon, really late in the evening, rather. Pilgrimage is the pilgrimage to Mecca. We will learn more about this from the video, but Muslims are asked if they're able to financially and physically to go on the Hajj. This is the pilgrimage to the Kaaba in Mecca, and there's a great deal of traditions that connect to the walking around the Kaaba, as well as the traditions in other, kind of areas near the Kaaba. And that becomes significant. It's, Mecca is seen as a sacred place to Muslims. Also, a few additional things. Every Muslim is expected to worship Allah directly, so it's done by individuals. There's like submission to Allah by everyone. So there's really not like a role of a priest, or like what we saw in the Middle Ages in Christianity, this like hierarchy with a pope at the top, and maybe other individuals who had regional authority, and the church was like a large scale administration that created, laws and rules. There's not really something like that in Islam. It's much more egalitarian. There may be imams who are like prayer leaders. That word is like, could mean different things, but you can have prayer leaders who lead the community in a mosque, for example, at prayer time. There's also a very significant scholarly class that plays a role in interpreting some of the religious texts to give people information and advice about, moral rights and wrongs. So whether or not something is considered to be problematic in Islam, individuals might consult a scholar, a religious scholar, who is part of the ulama, who is able to kind of give somebody advice and understanding and help them interpret some of the religious texts, usually a body of religious texts. The other thing that we might have is also the ulama might set up the interpretation, which is basically the Sharia. This is the law code. It may be incorporated to the political code, or it may be something that's informing people on a moral level, but it's based on the Quran, the Hadith, some other texts as well, okay? I will be back in a moment. I am getting a call from my husband. I'm going to be leaving shortly, so I will do the second part of this video later in the day. Thank you, everyone, for understanding.